I think that we did two things that were fundamentally wrong, and these reflect a deeper political economy failure, if you like, which I will come to. The two things we did wrong were that we forgot the critical role that the state has to play in infrastructure. And I mean both physical and social infrastructure. Physical infrastructure, of course, in terms of roads and dams and energy and all of those things, and social in terms of the schooling, the health infrastructure and all of that. We've neglected these utterly in the last 25 years, and I think that is really why we have ended up with such an unbalanced economy. And the other thing that we got very wrong is in terms of, shall I say, the entire area of smallholder enterprise. And here I'm referring to both agriculture and industry and small services. Our entire focus has been on large corporates. It's as if large corporates are the only key to development, to growth, to prosperity, and so on. And we know that's not true. We know that they will never be enough to employ all the people. They will never be enough to raise aggregate productivity in the economy. So we really had to have a focus on what we do to actually that huge sector of the small scale and self-employed. So those were the two big failures. For me, these are related to an underlying failure, which is something that has persisted in the post-independence period. And it is common to the import substitution phase and to the liberalization phase. And that is the inability to discipline the capitalist class, if you like. Because, India is a mixed economy. We were more of a mixed economy. We're still a mixed economy, but less public now. But we're not a successful one. The successful mixed economies, particularly in East Asia, Japan, Korea, China, and so on, the successful mixed economies have all had one critical feature, which is that they provide a lot of incentives to capitalists, but they also have a lot of disciplining power. And we have lacked the second. In the import substitution phase, we didn't discipline them, so they completely distorted it. They went haywire with it, and they made it a travesty of what it was meant to be. And in the liberalization phase, we haven't had it. So that insofar as we've had development, it's always been by offering more and more SOPs, more and more incentives. And then when those are not good enough, they say reforms have stalled. So give us more incentives, give us cheaper land, give us, etc. So I do believe that we could have gone another way. Of course, it depends on the political economy. You can't just say that there's a technocratic government that can decide. It depends on how the social and political forces are playing out. Unfortunately, it didn't play out in that way. What happened was not just reduction of control, but really a massive increase in the incentives to large corporate capital. Okay? On the other hand, the huge bulk of small capital, shall we say, small enterprises, urban, rural, semi-urban, agricultural, manufacturing, they're still under massive control. They're still having to cope with all kinds of Inspector Raj. They still have to fight every time for, you ask the fellow who's selling bananas how many people he has to pay hafta to be allowed to push that cart with the bananas on it. You ask the people who are small-time weavers in rural areas how many people they have to actually deal with. So I think the large body of actual small entrepreneurs, and we have to remember they are also businesses. Business doesn't only mean the Ambanis and the Tatas and the Adanis. We have really not made life that much easier for them, either in terms of the regulatory structures or the day-to-day kinds of power oppression that they face. I mean, sure, there have been some things. It did unleash growth, there's no doubt about it. Some of that growth did translate into certainly more urban incomes and the upper 20% of the rural incomes. However, I do think that it led to a dramatic increase in inequality. The nature of that growth entrenched these existing social divisions, which I think are absolutely appalling and which we are unique in the world, I think, in having so many of them and so deeply entrenched. I'm very happy now that there are social movements that are questioning them at every level, and I hope that these gather more steam. But therefore, what we've had is an economy which is not just unequal in your standard US inequality kind of way. We have a very particular kind of inequality. And it's based on location, rural, urban, it's based on your education level, it's based on your caste, it's based on your gender, it's based on your religion, it's based on your language, it's based on your ethnic group. So it's a very, very complicated thing. But our economic growth process has actually accentuated all of these, which I believe is unfortunate. And I think that's part of the reason why it has been also very unusual in that we've had all this growth without doing what any other society would consider to be the basics. I mean, 40% of rural India without electricity. You know, so many of our children not finishing school, terrible health conditions for 90% of our population. You know, these are basics for terrible nutrition indicators worse than sub-Saharan Africa. Most societies would think that these are the base and then you do the other stuff. So I do believe that our ability to have this growth and create this image of becoming an economic superpower without granting the minimum conditions of decent life to a very large part of our country is a reflection of those inequalities. In other words, we began with them, we've accentuated them, and that's given us this distorted growth. I think it's also bad because it's a very bad signal for the future. You will not get a stable economy, you will not get stable politics if you have that kind of inequality. And that in turn throws into question your potential growth.